A dying man confessed something he had kept buried for 25 years. He told his daughter she was not his daughter. She was bought, sold, the product of a transaction between a criminal and a man desperate to survive. But he also gave her a name, Dominic Reyes. And that name? It belonged to the man she was raised to fear, the man her adoptive father warned her about, the man she never knew was looking for her the entire time. So when this woman walked into a warehouse and met the person who had spent her entire life searching for her, she had to make a choice: trust a criminal or trust the life she had been living. She chose to trust him. And what happened next was not what anyone expected. It was not about crime. It was not about power or violence or any of the things you think a story like this should be about. It was about a man who had nothing left to lose, finally finding the only thing that ever mattered. It was about a daughter discovering that sometimes the person you are supposed to fear is actually the person who spent 25 years loving you from a distance. This channel does not tell stories about crime. This channel tells stories about the men and women born to rule, the ones who understand that true power is not measured in fear or money, but in loyalty, in vision, and in the invisible architecture of human connection that most people will never understand. Some lessons can only be learned by the ones willing to sacrifice everything. This story teaches you that redemption is not about erasing who you were. It is about becoming who you were always meant to be. It shows you that the most dangerous man can also be the most honest. It reveals that love is not weakness. It is the only real power that exists. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt that moment when a father finally found his daughter, when truth defeated lies, when love won against darkness, then you understand why you need to hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me, what would you have written on that check? Subscribe to this channel because these are the stories that change how you see the world.
The story begins in a place most people never have to go. A hospital bed, a machine that beeps every 3 seconds, and a man who is running out of time. My name is Camila, and I need you to understand something about me first. I am a neurosurgeon at Boston Medical Center. I have spent the last 11 years inside operating rooms where people are dying on tables, and only one thing matters: the precision of my hands, the steadiness of my breath, the absolute certainty that I know what I am doing. People do not call me a good person. They call me capable. They call me excellent. They call me the surgeon nobody wants, but everybody needs. But 3 months ago, everything about who I thought I was got burned down by words a dying man spoke into the hospital room air. The man was Robert Voss. He was my father. Or at least, he was the man I called my father for 25 years. He was 84 years old. His heart was failing. The doctors gave him until tomorrow, maybe the day after if we got lucky. I sat in a chair next to his bed. My hand was in his. His grip was weaker than it should be. That detail bothered me more than anything else about the situation. A hand that could not hold on. A man who could not stay. Robert looked at me. He had been looking at me for 3 days now with an expression I could not read. Robert Voss was a good man. He was kind in the way that wealthy people from Boston can be kind. Generous with money, careful with emotion, present but always somehow distant. He had never looked at me the way he was looking at me that night. His voice was barely above a whisper, but he was clear. He was precise. He wanted me to hear what he was saying, and he wanted me to understand that every word was true. "Camila," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not interrupt me until I am finished." I nodded. I did not speak. Robert took a breath. It took him a very long time, like he was gathering oxygen like it was courage. "Your mother and I," he said. "We could not have children. It was my fault. I was infertile. We wanted a child more than almost anything in the world. So we started looking into adoption. But we were in our late 30s. We were not young. Most adoption agencies told us no. I knew this story. I had known it since I was 7 years old and asked where babies came from. Robert had told me the truth then, in his way. The medical, careful, distant truth. But he was not finished. There was a man, Robert continued. He came to us through someone we knew, someone in the business world. This man said he could help us. He said he had a little girl, 6 years old. He said her situation was complicated. He said her father could no longer take care of her, and he said if we gave him a certain amount of money, she would be ours, legally, completely, no questions, no follow-up, no trace. I felt something happen in my chest, a tightness, a knowing, like my body understood what my mind had not yet caught up to. We paid him, Robert said. $120,000. At the time, that was nearly everything we had. Your mother took you from a car. A man handed you over like you were cargo. And we drove home. We changed your name from what it was to Camila. We told everyone you were adopted through an agency. Nobody questioned it. Robert coughed. It was a bad cough, the kind that means the heart is failing. When he could speak again, he said this: "For 25 years, I have told myself that what we did was save you, that we gave you a life that you would not have had, that we did something good. But the truth is simpler and uglier than that. We bought you. And the man who sold you, his name was Marco Vega. He did not own you. He was just the middleman, the man who really owned you, or the man who was looking for you. That man's name was Dominic Reyes." I could not move. My hands had gone cold. Robert squeezed my hand with the last of his strength. "Dominic Reyes," he said again, like he wanted me to memorize it, like he needed me to hear it twice to believe it was real. "Your biological father. He was looking for you. I do not know if he knows you are alive. I do not know if he ever found you. I do not know what he would do if he knew your name. But I am dying, and I cannot leave this world without telling you that. You deserve to know where you came from, even if it is complicated, even if it is difficult, especially then." Robert Voss died 2 days later at 3 in the morning. I was not there. The hospital called me at 6:30. By the time I arrived, he was already being moved. The body that was not my father anymore. Just a body. I did not cry. I could not cry. What I did instead was exactly what I have always done. I went back to work. I had surgeries scheduled. I had people depending on me. I had the kind of job where you cannot afford to fall apart, because people die when you are not thinking straight. So I did not think about what Robert told me. I did exactly the opposite. I thought about everything else. I performed surgeries, 4 of them in the first week, 6 the next week, 7 the week after that. By the time 3 months had passed, I had completed 47 surgical procedures. That is more than double my normal workload. My colleague, Nora Chen, the only person at the hospital who could even remotely be called my friend, found me in the locker room one morning and said something that made me stop pretending. Nora is practical in the way that oncologists have to be. She deals with death every day. It either breaks you or makes you honest. Nora chose honest. "Camilla," she said, "do you understand that you have performed 47 surgeries in 3 months? Do you understand that your normal load is maybe 20? This is not grieving. This is running." I did not argue with her. I knew she was right. But I did not know how to explain to her that I could not stop. I could not sit still. I could not be in a quiet room with my thoughts, because my thoughts were all the same thought now. Dominic Reyes. 3 months of carrying that name around like a stone in my chest. 3 months of wanting to research him and not researching him. 3 months of being afraid of what I would find. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon in May. I was in my office at the hospital when my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer. But something, maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was the 3 months of waiting, made me pick up the phone. The voice on the other end was a woman. Not young, not old. Measured, controlled. Cold in the way that people are cold when they have learned not to waste emotion on things that do not matter. Dr. Voss, she said. My name is Elena Rossi. I am calling on behalf of someone who has been trying to reach you for the past 3 months. The information you are looking for, we have it. And contrary to what you might believe, we did not take it from you. You took it from us when you were 6 years old. There is an address. You should come alone. Do not tell anyone where you are going. This message will delete itself in 60 seconds. I wrote down the address before the message disappeared. South Boston. A warehouse address. The kind of place that could be anything. The kind of place that is probably a trap. I went anyway. Because at this point, what did I have to lose? My life was already not mine anymore. It belonged to a ghost. It belonged to a name. It belonged to a man I had never met but apparently owed my existence to. I took my car. I did not tell Nora. I did not tell anyone. I just drove south toward the address and thought about how my life had been divided into 2 parts. Before Robert died, and after Robert died. Before and after. That is the only way you can measure something this big. The warehouse is not actually a warehouse when you get there. That is the first thing that surprises me. I am expecting something industrial, something dangerous, something that looks like a place where dangerous men conduct dangerous business. Instead, I find a clean space, gray stone walls, natural light coming through high windows, a long oak table, and sitting at that table, a man reading a book. He does not look up when I enter. He is reading something called The Anatomy of the Nervous System. It is a technical book, the kind of book that takes real effort to understand. He finishes a paragraph, then he adjusts his glasses, then he looks at me. Dominic Reyes is 44 years old. I know this because I looked him up after I got the address. I know he has been a businessman in Boston for the past 25 years. I know his name appears in old newspaper articles and then stops appearing. I know he is rich in the way that people are rich when they do not want to be rich publicly. What I do not know until I see him is that he has my eyes. He is tall. He moves like someone who knows exactly how much space his body occupies. His hair is dark with gray at the temples. His eyes are the same shade of gray as mine. The same exact shade. The kind of detail that nobody would notice unless they were looking for it. The kind of detail that is impossible to miss once you see it. You burned the note but memorized the address, he says. His voice is calm. And you wore a surgical mask in your car on the drive over. I saw the reflection in the traffic camera on Boylston Street. That tells me you are someone who takes precautions. But you came anyway. That tells me something else. What? I ask. That you are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, he says. I have not decided which. I sit down without being asked. I am a surgeon. I am used to taking control of rooms. But this is not my room, and I am not the one with information. Are you going to tell me who I am, I say? Or are we going to play chess with my identity? He nods like I have passed some kind of test. Maybe I have. Coffee? He asks. No, just talk. Dominic tells me a story. It takes 40 minutes. He does not hurry. He does not leave out details that seem small. He understands that small details are what make stories true. He tells me that in 1994, when he was 19 years old, his entire family was killed. Not by accident. By design. A man named Victor Salazar killed them. Victor Salazar was powerful in Boston in ways that most people did not understand. He dealt in territories and money and fear. Dominic survived because he was out of the city when it happened. A coincidence. A variable he did not control. The only thing that saved his life was being somewhere else. He tells me that in 1999, he met a woman. He loved her. They had a daughter. The daughter was born in 2000. Her name was going to be Lucia. He shows me a photograph. A Polaroid. A small child with dark hair and gray eyes. The eyes are mine. There is no doubt about this. The eyes are exactly mine. When she was born, Dominic says, I went to meet a man I had worked with before. His name was Marco Vega. I thought I could trust him. I was wrong about many things at that age. He tells me that Marco came to him with a problem. Marco owed a dangerous debt, to someone powerful. Marco asked if Dominic could help him pay it back. Dominic refused. Marco asked again. Dominic refused again. Then one day, Marco came to him and said something that changed everything. Marco said he was going to take the child. He was going to sell the child to a family in Boston, a wealthy family, and the debt would be paid. Dominic asked what would happen to the mother. Marco said the mother would go with the child. She would stay with the family. She would watch over the child and protect her. And when it was safe, the mother could bring the child back to Dominic. So Dominic let them go. Or he did not stop them. Or he trusted them. Or he made the worst decision of his life. I do not know which it was, and neither does he. 20 minutes after they left, Dominic says, the car Elena, that was the mother's name, the car was hit by a drunk driver. Elena was killed at the scene. The child was supposed to be in that car. At the last second, Marco rerouted the adoption, changed it to a different family, different names, different address. He stops talking. There is nothing more to say. The story is complete. I just did not know I was part of it until now. I spent 25 years not knowing if she was alive or dead, Dominic says. 10 years ago, someone I trusted told me she died in the accident, that she had been in the car with Elena after all, that I was looking for a ghost, so I stopped looking. For 10 years I did not look anymore. And then 3 months ago, a man died in a hospital in Boston. He told his daughter the truth before he died. He told her where she came from. He gave her a name. My name. I stand up. I need to stand up because I cannot process this sitting down. The photograph, I say. How do you know that is her? Because you have her eyes, he says simply. Because your birthday is July 3rd, 2000. Because Marco's last contact with me was in June of 2000. Because in all of 25 years, I have never found another child with those exact eyes. And because you are sitting in front of me right now, and you look exactly like her. You look exactly like the child I was looking for my entire adult life. I feel like I am drowning. I feel like I am also very clear, both things at the same time. What do you want? I ask him. He stands up. He is taller than I realized. Not threatening, just tall. I want you to work with me, he says. I am building something, a network of healthcare facilities for communities that have been abandoned by major hospitals. It is completely legal. It needs a medical director, someone with credentials nobody would question, someone like a neurosurgeon at Boston Medical Center. I wait for the threat, the leverage, the thing that would make this not a choice. It does not come. In exchange, he continues, I give you everything. All the documents about Marco Vega, the adoption records, the truth about your mother, everything I have. And if you refuse, I will ensure your safety from this moment forward without you ever seeing me again. You will never hear from me a second time. You have 48 hours to decide. I look at him. You are asking me to trust you, I say. No, he says. I am asking you to read me. You are a surgeon. You know how to read people. You know when they are lying. You can assess a body. You can understand the difference between what someone says and what someone means. I am telling you the truth. You can verify that for yourself. I look at his face. I look at his hands. I look at the way he breathes. He is not lying. I know because I have spent 11 years in operating rooms learning to read the fine tremors of human behavior. I know when someone's heart rate increases at a certain word. I know when breathing changes. I know the difference between someone who is afraid and someone who is not. Dominic Reyes is not afraid. He is sad. He is waiting. He is hopeful in a way that terrifies me. He is also completely honest. I need time, I say. You have 48 hours, he says. I leave the warehouse. I drive back to Boston. And I do exactly what any smart person would do. I research him. I call a lawyer. I verify every detail of his story that I can verify. I call the law enforcement office, and I listen to them be very careful about not confirming or denying that Dominic Reyes has been investigated for various crimes. But they do not deny it either. By Tuesday night, I have decided. By midnight, I send him a message. Yes, but on my terms, my schedule, my conditions. You answer every question completely honestly. His response comes in seconds. Understood. Come to the clinic tomorrow at noon. And that is how my life gets divided again. Before the clinic, and after the clinic. Before I knew Dominic Reyes was real, and after I knew he was real. That is how a person becomes two people. The clinic in Dorchester is located in a part of Boston that hospitals usually forget about. It is a neighborhood of corner stores and apartment buildings and people who work jobs that do not provide health insurance. The clinic is clean, modern. It looks like it cost real money. It looks like it is run by someone who understands that healthcare is not supposed to be a luxury product. When I arrive at noon on Wednesday, I find Dominic in an office that has nothing personal in it except for one thing: a book. The same book he was reading in the warehouse. The Anatomy of the Nervous System. He is not reading it this time. He is waiting for me. You will be consulting on the medical side, he says. I need someone to verify that this project is viable. Someone with expertise. Someone I can trust. Why do you think you can trust me? I ask. Because you came back, he says. Most people would not come back. He introduces me to the team. There are 6 people who run the clinic during the day: nurses, a physician's assistant, 2 administrative staff members, and one person who seems to be something else entirely. His name is Raphael. He is 29 years old. He is Dominic's half-brother. And the moment he sees me, his eyes widen in a way that tells me he knows something I am only beginning to understand. Holy shit, Raphael says. You are not kidding. Look at the eyes on her. That is straight up. Raphael, Dominic says. Just one word. But it stops Raphael like he hit a wall. Right, Raphael says quickly. I will be literally anywhere else, anywhere other than here. He leaves. I do not ask questions, but I file that away. Raphael knows something. Raphael is being told to keep quiet about something. Raphael understands something about me that I do not yet understand about myself. Dominic spends the next hour walking me through the clinic's operations. He shows me the pharmaceutical procurement system. It is entirely legal. He shows me the patient intake procedures. Legal. He shows me how medications are distributed. Legal in every way that I can see. But I notice something. I am good at noticing things. There is a redundancy built into the system. A backup for every critical function. A second way to do everything if the first way fails. This is not standard hospital protocol. This is the kind of system someone builds when they want control and contingency. I do not mention it. Not yet. Instead, I watch how Dominic conducts a meeting with 3 pharmaceutical suppliers. He does not threaten them. He does not raise his voice. He sits very still, and he listens to what they have to say. When he asks questions, he asks exactly 2 questions. Each question is surgical in its precision. After the meeting, the suppliers leave looking unsettled. They do not know why. But something about the way Dominic asked has shifted the balance of power in the room. I know the feeling. It is the feeling a patient has when they are under general anesthesia and they suddenly realize they are not in control anymore. They are in someone else's hands. They are completely at someone else's mercy. When we are alone again, Dominic says, "You were analyzing them." "The third man," I say. "From the left. He lied. You asked him about supply volumes and he said consistent with projections, but his breathing changed. He looked toward the door twice. He is planning to diversify his client base. He is not sure if you will accept that." Dominic nods like this confirms something he already knew. "I have known that for a week," he says. "I wanted to see if you could read it. You did." "What are you going to do?" I ask. "Give him the flexibility," Dominic says. "If I do not, he will go to someone else. If I do, he stays grateful. Control is not about keeping people trapped. It is about making them want to stay." Over the next 2 weeks, I spend 4 hours a day at the clinic. I verify that the operations are sustainable. I recommend staff changes. I suggest better screening protocols for patients. I do my job. I do my job very well. But every night when I go home to my apartment, I sit in the dark and I think about what I am not being told. The apartment is on the 32nd floor of a building in Back Bay. It cost a lot of money. Robert paid for it. Everything in it is expensive and nothing in it is personal. It is the kind of apartment that a successful person lives in when they do not actually live anywhere. It is the kind of space that exists only during the hours when you sleep. I start researching Dominic in the evenings. I find the old newspaper articles. I find references to something called the Reyes family. I find a section of Boston history that was violent and is now quiet. I find mentions of someone named Victor Salazar. And I find absolutely nothing that explains who Dominic Reyes actually is or what he does for money. On the 14th day of my work at the clinic, something changes. I am leaving the hospital after a 14-hour shift when my phone rings. It is Nora. "Camila," she says. Her voice is tight, different from normal. "Something happened. You need to know about something that happened." "Are you okay?" I ask. "I am fine," she says. "But someone approached me in the parking garage. Someone asked if I could provide information about your schedule, about when you work, about where you go. They offered me money, significant money." I stop walking. People are moving around me, nurses heading to cars, doctors heading to the cafeteria, patients being wheeled to imaging. The hospital continues like nothing has changed. But something has changed. "Did you recognize him?" I ask. "No," Nora says. "But he was very professional about it, very organized. This was not someone who does this casually." I call Dominic. He answers before the first ring completes. "It is beginning," he says before I even speak. "Who is Victor Salazar?" I ask him. There is a pause, a long pause. "The man who destroyed my family," he says finally. "The man who has been waiting for me to make a mistake, and the man who now knows you exist." He arrives at the hospital in 20 minutes. I do not know how he moves through the city that fast. I do not ask. He parks in a section of the garage I have never noticed before, and we sit in the darkness of his car while he explains to me what the next part of my life is going to look like. "Salazar knows that you are connected to me," he says. "I do not know how he found out, but he did, and he wants to use you. He wants to leverage you. He wants to control me by controlling you." "What does he want?" I ask. "Money," Dominic says. "Power. Control. The same things he has always wanted. But the way he wants them now is different. Now he wants them by destroying me." We sit in silence. Outside the car, the hospital continues. Inside the car, my entire understanding of the world is being reorganized. "You should not have come," I tell him. "Your being here is visible." "I know," he says, "but I have been here since 6 this morning, and I will be here tomorrow morning, because the moment Salazar realized you were important to me, your safety became my only concern." That night, Dominic insists that I do not go home. He tells me that his house is safer, that Elena, his housekeeper, his confidant, his right hand, will prepare a room for me, so I go to his house. It is on Beacon Hill. It is a townhouse from the 1700s that has been renovated by someone with money and taste. Inside, there are high ceilings and natural light and books everywhere. There is no art. There is no ostentation. There is just space and light and the feeling of a place designed by someone who understands that true luxury is simplicity. Elena is waiting. She is 58 years old. She is perhaps the most controlled human being I have ever encountered. She looks at me with an expression I cannot read. Then she nods once. "You have his eyes," she says. It is the only thing she says to me. That night, I sleep in a room that has never been slept in before. There is nothing in it except a bed and a dresser and complete emptiness. I lie awake and I think about how my life has become split into sections. Before my father died. After my father died. Before I knew about Dominic Reyes. After I knew about Dominic Reyes. Before the clinic. After the clinic. Now there is a new division. Before someone tried to buy information about me. And after. Everything is after. Over the next month, I learn how to live in two worlds simultaneously. During the day, I am Dr. Camila Voss. I work at Boston Medical Center. I perform surgeries. I see patients. I have a normal life, the kind of life that exists on the surface of things. At night, I am someone else. I am the daughter of a man named Dominic Reyes. I am learning about a world that I did not know existed. I am learning about supply chains and protection, and the kind of business that operates in the spaces between what is legal and what is not. Dominic does not teach me these things directly. Instead, he lets me observe them. He brings me to meetings. He lets me sit quietly while he conducts business with people who look normal on the surface, but are something else underneath. He lets me read their behavior. He lets me understand. I begin to see patterns. The way that people in his world communicate is not through words. It is through pauses. It is through the way they look at a door. It is through small adjustments in breathing when they are about to say something important. Everything I learned in medical school about reading patients now applies to understanding the criminal underworld. A liar has the same tell whether they are lying about their symptoms or lying about their supply route. Fear looks the same whether you are afraid of a diagnosis or afraid of a superior. Raphael becomes my translator in this world. He is easier to talk to than Dominic. He is younger. He has not lost everything. He still has something like lightness in him, even though he works in a world that is supposed to be dark. "How long have you known?" I ask him one day. It is a Saturday. We are sitting in Dominic's kitchen and Elena is making food that is so good it almost hurts. "About what?" Raphael says, but he knows what I mean. "That I exist," I say. Raphael looks away. He looks at Elena. Elena does not change her expression. "Since you were born," Raphael says finally. "Dominic told me when I was 16. He said he had a daughter. He said she was alive somewhere in Boston. He said he did not know if she knew he existed. He said he was going to spend his life finding her, if that is what it took." "And did you ever try to find me?" I ask. "No," Raphael says, "because Dominic would not let us. He said you had a life, you had a family, you had a chance to be normal. He was not going to steal that from you." Elena places a plate of pasta in front of me. It is perfect. Everything about it is exactly right. "But if he had found you," Raphael says quietly, "if you were in trouble, or if you needed him, he would have been there in the time it takes to make a phone call." That same week, something shifts in how Salazar operates. Dominic brings me to a meeting that I understand now, in retrospect, was a trap. But not a trap for me. A trap for someone else. We are at a restaurant. An expensive restaurant. The kind of place where people speak quietly, and the lighting is low. Dominic is meeting with a man named Victor Salazar. I did not know Salazar was going to be there. I did not know I was supposed to be there. Dominic arranged it so I would be at the table next to his table, so I could observe without being observed. Salazar is 60 years old. He moves like a man who has taken what he wanted his entire life. He has gray at his temples like Dominic, but where Dominic is controlled, Salazar is coiled. He is something ready to strike. They do not shake hands. They do not greet each other with familiarity. They sit across from each other like chess players who are about to begin a game that has taken them years to set up. I cannot hear what they say, but I can read them. Dominic is calm. He is so calm that it is almost terrifying. This is a man who has decided something. This is a man who is not worried. Salazar is different. Salazar is confident, but there is something underneath the confidence. Something like uncertainty. Something like the knowledge that he is in the presence of someone he does not completely understand. Dominic says something. I see it in his mouth. And Salazar's entire body responds. His grip on his glass tightens. His jaw shifts. He has just heard something that frightens him. A moment later, Dominic stands up. He looks at me. He nods. We leave. In the car, I ask what happened. I told him that I know everything, Dominic says. I know about Marco. I know about the child. I know about the accident. and I know that it was not an accident at all. I know that he orchestrated it, and I know that he has been lying about it for 25 years. What did he say? I ask. He said I cannot prove any of it, Dominic says. And he is right, I cannot. Not yet, but I will. 2 days later, a woman comes to the hospital looking for me. I do not know who she is at first. She is a patient waiting for a consultation. She is asking about a brain tumor. She is very gracious. She is very polite. Her name is Margaret Chen. She is, she tells me, the mother of my colleague Nora Chen. She has had some headaches and her doctor recommended an MRI. I run the scan. There is no tumor. There is nothing wrong with her. Thank you for seeing me, Margaret says as she is leaving. And thank you for taking such good care of my daughter. I do not think anything of it until later that night. Nora calls me at home. She is crying. My mother came to see you, Nora says. She came to see you because someone paid her. Someone paid her to be seen by you, to establish a connection between your workplace and someone on the outside. Who paid her? I ask. Victor Salazar, Nora says. At least, that is what my mother understood. Someone representing him. Someone who explained that you were involved in something dangerous. That my mother should be seen by you so that Salazar would have a connection to you that was not threatening. A connection that was medical, something that could not be interrupted or questioned. I hang up and I call Dominic immediately. He is moving faster than I expected, Dominic says. And then, we need to accelerate our plans. A month passes, then 2 months. Everything is happening at a speed that is too fast, and also somehow still not fast enough. I am living in two worlds and both worlds are collapsing at the same time. At the hospital, I am performing more surgeries. I am distracted. I am running on adrenaline and coffee, and the kind of focus that comes when you are afraid. My colleagues notice. Nora notices especially. She watches me like she is trying to read something in my face that I am not saying out loud. But at night, I am with Dominic, and we are preparing for something. I do not know what yet, but I can feel it coming. One evening, Dominic takes me to his office. It is the first time I have been there. It is not at the clinic in Dorchester. It is somewhere else. Somewhere private. It is a room with computer servers and filing cabinets and photographs on the wall. And on one of those photographs is a picture of me. Not recent, not a picture he took, but a photograph that is at least 6 months old. A photograph of me walking to work. A photograph of me eating lunch in the hospital cafeteria. A photograph of me. I have been watching you, Dominic says. I do not react because I already knew this. I have known for weeks that I am being watched. Not to invade your privacy, but to keep you safe. To know where you are. To know that you are all right. How long? I ask him. Since the moment I found your name, he says. Since I realized you were alive. He opens a filing cabinet. Inside are documents, birth certificates, hospital records, a name that is not my name. Elena Vega. That was my name when I was born. That was my name before Robert Voss bought me. There is a DNA test result in the cabinet, not from the hospital, from somewhere else. A private lab, a test done years ago, before I was even born probably. Dominic's DNA, and notes next to it saying, possible match pending verification. When did you do this? I ask. 10 years ago, Dominic says, when I was trying to find you. I had a hypothesis. I had your mother's DNA from the hospital records of the accident. I compared it to my own. The match was 99.2%. I knew you were alive, I just did not know where. Why did you stop looking? I ask him. Because someone told me you were dead, he says. Someone I trusted. Someone who worked for me. They told me that the child had been in the car, that you had not survived the accident. They told me I was looking for a ghost. I believed them for 10 years, and then Robert Voss died, and he told you the truth, and I understood that I had been lied to. By Salazar, I say. By Salazar, Dominic confirms. He kept me away from you deliberately. He knew if he told me you were dead, I would stop looking. I would stop trying to find you. And I did. For 10 years, I did exactly what he wanted me to do. I sit down. I feel the weight of this information pressing down on me. What do you want me to do? I ask him. I want you to decide, Dominic says, whether you want to be part of what is about to happen. Because Salazar is not just going to stop. He is going to accelerate. He is going to make a move. And when he does, I am going to be ready. But I cannot do that and protect you at the same time. So I have to choose, I say. I can either be protected and be ignorant, or I can be informed and be in danger. Yes, Dominic says. That is exactly what you have to choose. I think about this for a very long time. I think about my apartment on the 32nd floor that does not feel like home. I think about my surgeries where I save lives that are not my life. I think about Robert Voss lying in a hospital bed and telling me a truth that has fundamentally altered the structure of my world. I want to be part of it, I say. I want to know what is happening. I want to be useful. I do not want to be protected like I am fragile. Dominic nods like he has been waiting for me to say this. Then we need to do something, he says. We need to establish a connection between you and Salazar. We need to make him think you are working with me willingly. We need to make him believe that you are assets, not liability. How do we do that? I ask. We create a paper trail, he says. We create records of consulting work. We create pharmaceutical recommendations that come through you. We create a situation where Salazar can see that you are involved in my operations. Once he believes that, he will try to leverage you. And once he tries to leverage you, I will be able to move. Over the next 3 weeks, this is exactly what happens. Dominic has me recommend specific medications for the clinic. Medications that are legal but are diverted. Medications that go through a channel that is not quite legitimate. Medications that create a connection between my medical expertise and Dominic's operation. It is all legal. Technically, it is also exactly what Salazar is looking for. Evidence that I am more than just a daughter, that I am actively participating in his operation. 1 month after I start, a man comes to the hospital to see me. He is one of Salazar's people. He offers me money, $50,000, for allowing my name to be used on certain pharmaceutical reports. I accept. I do not tell anyone except Dominic. Now I am a criminal. Now I am part of something dark. Now I have made a choice that cannot be unmade. Dominic tells me when the plan is going to be executed. It is going to be a Tuesday, a restaurant, a public place, controlled environment. He is going to meet with Salazar, and he is going to show Salazar something that will force Salazar to act. What am I supposed to do? I ask him. You are supposed to be there, he says. You are supposed to be at the table next to ours. You are supposed to have a pen, and you are supposed to be ready to write something when the moment comes. What am I going to write? I ask. You will know when the time comes, he says. Your instincts are good. You read people better than anyone I have ever known. You will know what to do. That Tuesday arrives like any other Tuesday. I go to work, I perform a surgery, I eat lunch, I see patients, I do all the things that a normal person does. And then at 6 o'clock in the evening, I drive to the restaurant. The restaurant is called Stella's. It is the kind of place where they know your name and they bring you water without asking. It is the kind of place where conversations happen at tables where nobody else can hear. Dominic is already there when I arrive. He is sitting at a corner table. He is reading a menu like he is someone who is about to have dinner. He does not look at me. I walk to the table next to him. A server comes and brings me water and bread. I order something I will not eat. I sit there and I wait. At 7 o'clock, Salazar arrives. He is wearing a suit that costs more than my car costs. He is moving like a man who owns the space he is occupying. He sits down across from Dominic, and they regard each other for a very long time before either of them speaks. You are looking well, Dominic says finally. You look tired, Salazar replies. I have been looking for something for a very long time, Dominic says. It is exhausting work. And did you find it? Salazar asks. I did, Dominic says. I found out what you did. I found out who you paid. I found out how you lied. I found out that you told me my daughter was dead when she was alive. I found out that you kept us apart deliberately. I found out that you have been waiting all this time to see if I would break. I am watching this from my table. I am reading their bodies. Dominic is ice. Salazar is heat. He is responding to what he has just heard. He is afraid. He is trying not to be afraid, but he is. You cannot prove any of this, Salazar says. No, Dominic agrees. I cannot. Not in the way that matters. Not in a way that law enforcement would accept. But I do not need to prove it to a judge. I only need to prove it to you. Salazar makes a phone call. I see him do it. He puts the phone to his ear and he says, "Get the girl. Do it now. Use the leverage we discussed." He thinks he still has power. He thinks he can still control this situation by controlling me. This is the moment. This is the moment where everything changes. I reach into my purse. I take out a pen. I take out the check that the server has placed at my table, and I write 5 words on the back of it. Sniper on the roof, run. I signal the server. I ask him to take it to the table. I tell him the man at the corner table ordered it. He looks at me confused, but he does it. He places the check in front of Salazar. Salazar opens it. He reads it. And I watch his face as he understands what has just happened. He thought he was in control. He thought he understood the game. He thought he was 3 moves ahead, but he is 3 moves behind. He stands up. He moves toward the door. And that is when the restaurant becomes chaos. There are agents, federal agents, DEA agents, agents from the Boston Police Department. They have been waiting outside. They have been listening to the entire conversation. They have been recording every word. Salazar runs for the door and he runs directly into their hands. It is the most anticlimactic ending to a crime that I have ever witnessed. There is no violence. There is no dramatic confrontation. There is just a man running and people catching him. There is just a man understanding that he has lost. Dominic stands up. He looks at me. He nods once. And he walks out of the restaurant like he has somewhere else to be. I sit at my table for 30 minutes. I finish my food. I pay my check. I do not look at Salazar as he is being led away. I do not acknowledge any of this is happening. I just leave like a normal person leaving a restaurant on a normal Tuesday evening. Later that week, I receive a call from the FBI. They want to interview me. They want to know about the pharmaceutical diversion. They want to know about my involvement with Dominic Reyes. They want me to make a choice between protecting him and protecting myself. So I make a choice. I tell them everything. I tell them about the medications. I tell them about the clinic. I tell them about how Dominic used me to create evidence against Salazar. I tell them about Robert Voss and the money and the adoption. But I also tell them something else. I tell them about Salazar. I tell them about the accident that was not an accident. I tell them about how Salazar deliberately separated a man from his daughter for 25 years. I tell them about the lie that was told to keep a father from searching for his child. I tell them that if they arrest Dominic Reyes, they will be letting Victor Salazar's greatest crime go unpunished. The federal prosecutors listen to me. They evaluate what I have told them, and they make a decision. Victor Salazar is charged with 23 federal crimes: fraud, trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder. He pleads guilty to reduce his sentence, and he receives 23 years in prison. Dominic Reyes is never charged. The pharmaceutical diversion was too small. The clinic was too legal. The evidence against him was too circumstantial. He did not break any law that they could prove in court. He is free. And 3 months later, I finally allow myself to ask the question that has been burning in me since the moment I saw the photograph in his office. "Are you sure?" I ask him. We are sitting in his kitchen. It is a Saturday morning. Elena has made breakfast and then left us alone. "Are you absolutely certain that I am your daughter? That this is not a mistake?" Dominic reaches into his pocket. He takes out something that I have never seen before. A small gold bracelet. It is tiny. It is meant for an infant. And engraved on it is a single word: Lucia. "I have kept this for 25 years, he says. "I have looked at it every day. I have told myself stories about a girl who wore this. And then one day, a girl walked into my office, and she had my eyes. She had my birthday. She had my mother's intelligence and my father's stubbornness. She read people the way that I have always read people. She made decisions the way that I make decisions. And she sat at a table in a restaurant and she wrote 5 words that saved my life. He puts the bracelet on the table between us. I am sure, he says. I have always been sure. After Salazar is convicted, things change. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in the way that a room changes when you open a window and let light in for the first time. Dominic stops being a criminal, or rather, he stops operating as one. He liquidates most of his business interests. The ones that are legal become more legitimate. The ones that are not legal are simply shut down. It is like watching someone pack up a life and put it into storage. I ask him why. Because I do not need to do this anymore, he says. We are sitting in his office. The photographs of me on the wall are gone. There are just books now, just his books. I spent 25 years building an empire because I needed protection. I needed power. I needed to be strong enough that nobody could take anything from me again. But now I have you, and I do not need an empire. I just need to not lose you. The clinic in Dorchester continues. But it becomes different. It becomes actually what it appeared to be. A real healthcare facility, a real community resource, something good. I stay at the clinic. I am there 2 days a week, in addition to my work at Boston Medical Center. I bring medical expertise. I bring credentials. I bring the things that Dominic always wanted me to bring. Raphael notices the change in Dominic first. He smiles now, Raphael tells me one day. We are standing in the clinic looking at patient files. I have known my uncle for my entire life, and I do not think I have ever seen him smile, but he smiles now. It is weird. It is really weird. What does he smile about? I ask. You, Raphael says. He smiles when he is talking to you. He smiles when he is talking about you. He smiles when you are not even there, but he is thinking about you. Nora notices the change in me. You are different, she tells me one evening. We are in the cafeteria at Boston Medical Center. You are still intense about surgery. You are still brilliant at what you do, but you are not running anymore. You are not performing 40 surgeries a month to avoid being in a quiet room. You are present. You are actually here. I am. I did not realize it until she said it, but she is right. I am present in my life in a way that I have never been present before. My social life changes too. I start accepting invitations. I go to dinner with other surgeons. I go to conferences. I start building a network of colleagues who are not running from anything, who are not hiding anything, who just have normal, complicated lives. And I visit my father. Because that is what Dominic is now. My father. There is a moment, 6 months after Salazar's conviction, when I realize this without any doubt. I am performing a surgery. It is a complex case. The patient has a tumor in an area of the brain that is difficult to access. I am focused. I am in the zone. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. And I think, I want to tell my father about this. Not Robert. Not the man who bought me. My father. Dominic. That night, I do tell him. I sit in his kitchen and I describe the surgery in exact detail, and he listens. Not because he understands neurosurgery, but because he understands excellence. He understands precision. He understands what it means to do something perfectly. You saved his life, Dominic says when I am finished. I did my job, I say. No, Dominic says. You did more than your job. You did something that only you could do. That is saving a life. That is the difference between being competent and being necessary. I realize this is how he sees me, as someone necessary, as someone who is not replaceable, as someone whose existence matters. It is the first time I have ever felt that. Not achieved it, not earned it, just felt it, like it was always true, and I just finally understood. The next step is the hardest step. It is the step where I have to decide if I want to be Lucia. Dominic does not push me toward this. If anything, he is careful to give me space. But I know he wants it. I know he has spent 25 years waiting for his daughter to choose him, to choose the name that he chose, to choose the identity that he has been keeping safe in a drawer. I ask Elena about it one day. Elena and I have become closer over the months. She is not warm, but she is present. She is someone who understands difficult things. What was your mother like? I ask her. The first Elena, the mother that Dominic loved. Elena sits down. She does not usually sit down when I ask her questions, but this question warrants sitting. She was a musician, Elena says. She was brilliant. She was difficult. She was someone who knew exactly what she wanted and had no tolerance for anything less. She loved Dominic with the kind of love that destroys people if it is not returned perfectly. And he did return it perfectly. But the world was not perfect, so she could not stay. Do you think she would have wanted him to spend 25 years looking for me? I ask. Yes, Elena says. I think she would have wanted exactly that, because she would have understood that looking for you was the same thing as loving her. The search was the love. I think about this for a long time. Then one evening, I am at my apartment, my 32nd floor apartment that still does not feel like home, and I realize that I do not want to live here anymore. I do not want to live in a place that is empty. I do not want to live in a place that is mine in a way that means I am alone. So I call Dominic. Can I move in? I ask him. Not to disappear into your world, not to become a full-time member of your household, just to live somewhere that feels like home, just to be in a place where I can walk downstairs in the morning and see you reading the same book you always read. There is a pause. Yes, he says finally. His voice is steady, but I can hear something underneath it. Relief, joy, the sound of someone who has waited for something for so long that they forgot how to hope for it. I move in on a Saturday in September. I do not give up my apartment. I keep it. But I live at Dominic's house, and over time it becomes my house too. I bring books. I bring photographs. I bring the things that make a space into a home. Elena cooks every evening. We eat dinner together. Dominic and I. Raphael when he stops by. And slowly, this becomes normal. This becomes my life. One evening, about 3 months after I move in, Dominic gives me something. It is a small box. Inside is the bracelet, the gold bracelet with the name Lucia engraved on it. I am not asking you to change your name, he says. You are Camila. That is who you are. That is who you have always been. But if you want to know what your name could have been, what it was supposed to be, if you want to remember the girl you might have been, then this is that. You do not have to wear it. You do not have to use it. But it is here if you want it. I look at the bracelet for a very long time. Then I put it on. It is too big. It slides around my wrist. It is not designed for an adult. It is designed for an infant. It is a piece of jewelry that has been waiting a long time for its owner. I wear it every day. Under my sleeves at the hospital where nobody can see. On my wrist at home where everyone can see. On my wrist when I am with Dominic because he needs to know that I am choosing this, that I am choosing him. The trial of Victor Salazar takes 6 months. It takes that long because the federal government has to build a case using evidence that was not gathered by methods that would be admissible in court. They have to prove that Salazar committed crimes not just against Dominic, but against other people, other families, other people who disappeared in the 1990s and early 2000s. I testify. I stand in a courtroom and I explain the pharmaceutical diversion. I explain how Salazar tried to use the medical supply chain to accumulate leverage. I explain how Dominic set him up. I explain everything. The prosecutor asks me if I am afraid of Salazar. I look at Salazar. He is 56 years old now. He is in prison clothes. He is smaller in the courtroom than he seemed in the restaurant. No, I say. I am not afraid of him, but I feel sorry for him. He spent his entire life trying to control things that could not be controlled. He spent his entire life being afraid that someone would do to him what he did to other people. And that fear was justified. That is all he built. Just fear. And now, that is all he has left. The jury deliberates for 2 days. Then they come back and they convict him on 12 counts. Conspiracy, racketeering, wire fraud, the federal charges that carry actual prison time. Victor Salazar is sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. He will not be released until he is 86 years old. When the verdict is read, I look over at Dominic. He is sitting in the back of the courtroom with Elena. He is not celebrating. He is not smiling. He is just absorbing the information, like he has been absorbing information his entire life. Like this is just one more thing that has happened that he will process and move forward from. After the trial, the prosecutor approaches me. "Thank you," she says. "Your testimony was crucial. Without you, we would not have had enough to make the case stick." "What happens to him now?" I ask. "He goes to federal prison. He will spend the rest of his functional life in a cell. He will die in prison, most likely. There is nothing he can do about that now." I nod. I understand the justice that has been served, but I do not feel victorious. I feel tired. I feel like a thing that needed to happen has finally happened, but that does not make it less sad. After the trial, we go back to normal. Or as normal as things can be when your father is a man who spent 25 years in the criminal underworld and your mother was stolen from him by a drunk driver you never knew. A year passes, then another year. Time moves differently when you are not running, when you are not performing surgery after surgery to avoid being alone, when you are not hiding from the truth about where you come from. Dominic has completely transitioned to legitimate business. He owns real estate now. He owns parts of businesses that help people. He is building wealth in a way that is visible and legal and completely acceptable. I continue working at Boston Medical Center. I also continue my work at the clinic. 2 days a week, I am the medical director for a healthcare facility that serves the communities that hospitals forget about. It is the best work I do, better than the surgeries, better than the things that make me famous or celebrated. It is the work that matters in a quiet way. One evening, Dominic sits down with me and he says something that I have been waiting for him to say since the moment I moved in. "I do not know how to do this," he says. We are in the kitchen. Elena has left us alone. Being a father, being someone's family. I have been alone for so long that I do not know the rules anymore. If there are rules. If there should be rules. There are no rules, I tell him. There is just showing up, just being present, just not running away when things get difficult. "I am afraid," he says. "I am afraid that I will fail you. I am afraid that you will realize that I am not what you needed. I am afraid that you will leave." "I am not leaving," I say. "I am here. I am choosing to be here every single day. And if something changes, I will tell you. I will not just disappear." He nods. He understands me. He understands what I am saying because he is someone who has always needed to know the truth before anything else. That evening, Dominic tells me about my mother, the real Elena. He tells me about the first time he heard her play violin. He tells me about her intensity, her brilliance, her refusal to accept mediocrity. "You are like her," he says. "You have her standards, you have her intelligence, you have her unwillingness to settle for anything less than excellence." "Do you think she would be proud of me?" I ask. "I think she would be awed by you," he says. "I think she would look at the woman you have become, and she would understand that the world is exactly as difficult as she always believed it was, but that you are navigating it anyway, with grace and precision. That is exactly the kind of person she wanted to be." In the evening hours of a Saturday, I make a decision. I ask Dominic if I can change my name legally, not from Camila. Camilla is who I am. But I ask if I can change my last name from Voss to Reyes. Dominic does not cry, but something happens in his face. Something that suggests that a weight he has been carrying for 25 years has finally been put down. "Are you sure?" he asks me. "Yes," I say. "I am sure. I want to be your daughter. Not in the way that you have secretly been my father, but in a way that the entire world knows. A way that is official and legal and permanent." The paperwork takes 3 months, but eventually, I become Camila Reyes. 2 years after Victor Salazar goes to prison, I am performing a routine surgery. It is not complicated. It is not the kind of case that makes headlines. It is just a patient with a condition and a doctor with the expertise to help. I am focused. I am in the zone. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. And I think about my life, about the journey from being Camila Voss, alone in a 32nd floor apartment, to being Camila Reyes, living in a house on Beacon Hill with a father who reads books about anatomy and a housekeeper who has started using my first name when she says good morning. The surgery is successful. The patient will be fine. I do my job. I do my job perfectly. I save lives. I save this life. And when I remove the surgical mask and I step out of the operating room, I think, I am going to tell my father about this. Not because he needs to know the medical details, but because he likes to know about the things that matter to me. And this matters. That evening, I go home. Home is the house on Beacon Hill now. It has been for 2 years. It is the place where I keep my books, the place where Elena makes dinner, the place where I come home and there is someone waiting for me. Dominic is reading in the library when I get there. He is reading the same book he has been reading for 3 years. The Anatomy of the Nervous System. He has probably read it 20 times by now, but he keeps reading it. I tell him about the surgery. He listens. He asks questions. He understands not just the technical aspects, but what the surgery meant. What it meant to be the person who could do it. You saved a life today, he says when I am finished. I did my job, I say. No, he says. You did more than your job. You did something that only you could do. That is the difference between being competent and being necessary. He has said this to me before. It is his way of telling me that I matter, not because of who my father is, not because of the name I carry, but because of what I am able to do. Later that evening, I sit in the kitchen and I write something down. I write down the words that I wrote on a check in a restaurant 2 years ago. The words that changed everything. Sniper on the roof, run. I think about that moment. I think about how I did not understand what I was doing. I was just following Dominic's instruction to write something. I was just trusting that my instincts were correct, and they were. Elena walks through the kitchen and sees what I have written. That was a good moment, she says. She does not usually comment on things, but this she comments on. It was, I agree. It was a moment where everything changed. That is what happens when you choose, Elena says. When you choose to be part of something, when you choose to be brave, when you choose to be honest, everything changes. I think about the choices I have made. I chose to go to the warehouse. I chose to learn about the pharmaceutical world. I chose to work with my father instead of against him. I chose to write those 5 words on a check that exposed a criminal. I chose to testify in court. I chose to move into this house. I chose to become Camila Reyes. Every choice led to this moment, every single one. Dominic comes into the kitchen. He has something in his hand. It is an envelope. Inside is a piece of paper. It is a birth certificate. My original birth certificate. The one from the hospital where I was born. The name on the certificate is Lucia Elena Reyes. I wanted you to have this, Dominic says. Not because you need to change your name again, but because this is who you were supposed to be. This is who your mother wanted you to be. This is the name that I chose for you when I thought I would get to raise you. I kept this certificate for 25 years. I kept it so that I would never forget what it felt like to be a father, even when I was not sure I would ever meet you. I hold the certificate. I read my original name. Lucia Elena Reyes. Elena was my mother's name. Lucia is what my father chose. Together, they make up the person I was supposed to be. The person I could have been. The person that I am, in a way, regardless of what name I carry. Thank you, I say. For what? Dominic asks. For never stopping, I say. For looking for me even when you thought I was dead. For keeping the bracelet. For keeping the certificate. For keeping the hope that I would come back to you. You were never lost, Dominic says. You just had to find your way home. That night, I sit in my room and I wear the gold bracelet, the one with Lucia engraved on it. I wear it on my wrist, and I think about the journey that brought me here. I think about Robert Voss and the confession he made on his deathbed. I think about Marco Vega and the woman he paid. I think about Victor Salazar and the lie he told to keep a father and daughter apart. I think about Dominic. I think about the man who spent 25 years looking for me. The man who kept a photograph of a girl he did not know. The man who built an empire out of grief and fear and the desperate hope that his daughter was alive somewhere. And I think about myself. I think about the neurosurgeon who was running from her own identity. The woman who performed 40 surgeries in 3 months to avoid thinking about where she came from. The doctor who walked into a warehouse and discovered that the unknown part of herself was the most important part. I am both Camilla and Lucia now. I am the woman I became and the woman I could have been. Tomorrow, I will go to work. I will perform surgeries. I will save lives. I will be the surgeon that people need, the doctor that people depend on. But tonight, I am just a daughter sitting with a bracelet on her wrist and a birth certificate on her nightstand. Tonight, I am home. And that is more than enough. The story does not end. Stories never really end. They just pause at a moment when the character has found what they were looking for. Dominic continues to expand his legitimate businesses. He becomes known in Boston as a philanthropist, a man who cares about healthcare in underserved communities, a man who builds clinics and funds research. Nobody knows where his money came from. Nobody particularly cares anymore. People are satisfied with what he does now. I continue to be a neurosurgeon. I continue to save lives. I continue to do the work that only I can do. But I do it differently now. I do it with someone waiting for me to come home. I do it with a father who asks how my day went. I do it with a family. Raphael becomes the administrator of the clinic in Dorchester. He is good at it. He has his uncle's gift for understanding people and his mother's gift for caring about them. The clinic becomes one of the best healthcare facilities in Boston. People line up for appointments. They come because they trust that the care they receive there is real and it matters. Elena continues to run Dominic's house. She continues to make food that heals. She never says much, but one day, 3 years after I move in, she tells me something important. I loved him, she says about Dominic. We are in the kitchen and she is making pasta. Before your mother, after your mother, even when he was doing terrible things. I loved him because he was someone who was trying to survive. And I respected him because he was always honest about that. He never pretended to be better than he was. He just was. Do you still love him? I ask her. Yes, she says. In the way that you love someone who has become family. In the way that you love someone who knows all your secrets and stays anyway. Nora becomes my best friend. She also becomes the best oncologist at Boston Medical Center. We have coffee together every Wednesday. She helps me navigate the world of being a doctor. I help her understand the world of family. We balance each other out. And Victor Salazar? He dies in prison at the age of 78. He is in the medical ward of the federal penitentiary when it happens. A heart attack. He is not conscious when it occurs. He does not suffer. I do not know how I feel about that. I do not know if I wanted him to suffer. But I am at peace with how it ended. My name is Camila Reyes. I am a neurosurgeon. I am a daughter. I am someone who has lived 2 lives and made them into 1 life. I am someone who chose her father. I am someone who was found, not by accident, but by choice. And every evening, when I come home to the house on Beacon Hill, I think about the 5 words that changed everything. The words I wrote on a check in a restaurant 2 years ago: sniper on the roof, run. It was not about violence. It was not about guns or danger or anything like that. It was about the moment when you have to choose truth over safety, when you have to choose honesty over comfort, when you have to write something that will destroy the careful architecture of lies that someone else has built. It was about a moment when I understood that sometimes being brave means being honest. Sometimes being strong means choosing trust. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is tell the truth. And so I tell it, every day, in my work as a surgeon, in my relationship with my father, in the way that I live my life. I tell the truth. And that is how I found my way home. This story exists within the realm of fiction, where imagination shapes reality. Any similarities to real-life individuals, organizations, or events are entirely coincidental. The author does not endorse or represent any real entity through the content of this work.
When you first hear this story, you might think it is about crime. You might think it is about a dangerous man and a woman who gets caught in his world. You might think the moral is that good people should stay away from darkness. But that is not what this story is about at all. This story is about something far more important. It is about the moment when you realize that the person you were taught to fear might actually be the person who loved you the most. It is about how we are all divided into two parts: the life we are given and the life we choose. And it is about how the most courageous thing you can do is choose the truth. Let me explain what makes this different from every other crime story you have heard. Dominic Rios is a criminal. He built an empire through fear and control. He operated in gray areas. He broke laws. He was, by every traditional measure, a bad man. But here's the part that matters. When his daughter finally came to him, he did not try to pull her into his darkness. He did not use her. He did not exploit her. Instead, he did the hardest thing a man in his position could do. He let her choose. That is the first moral lesson. Real power is not about control. Real power is about giving people the freedom to choose and believing that they will choose you anyway. Most people get this backwards. They think if you can make someone stay, if you can threaten them or manipulate them or trap them, that means you have power. But that is weakness. That is desperation. That is a man so afraid of losing something that he kills the very thing he is trying to protect. Dominic understood something that takes most people a lifetime to learn. You cannot own another person. All you can do is be honest with them. All you can do is show them who you really are and trust that they will stay because they want to, not because they have to. The second moral lesson is about courage. When Camila wrote those 5 words on the check, she was not doing it for justice. She was not doing it because she was brave. She was doing it because she understood something crucial in that moment. The truth matters more than safety. Honesty matters more than comfort. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth. We live in a world that teaches us to protect ourselves, to be quiet, to not speak up, to not risk. But this story shows you that the opposite is true. When you speak the truth, even when it costs you everything, you become unstoppable. You become the person nobody can control because you are no longer controlled by fear. The third moral lesson is about redemption. Dominic spent 25 years as a criminal. He did terrible things. He made terrible choices. But he also spent those 25 years being honest about what he was. He did not pretend to be better than he was. He just was. And because of that honesty, when he finally had the chance to be better, he took it. He changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but meaningfully. That is what redemption actually is. It is not erasing your past. It is not pretending you are someone different. It is simply deciding that starting today, starting now, starting right this second, you are going to make better choices. And the final lesson, the one that ties everything together, is this. The most dangerous man in Boston was also the most honest. He was honest about his weaknesses. He was honest about his love. He was honest about his failures. And that honesty made him more powerful than any criminal empire ever could be.